Yeah, it's a very strange place to be because we have, for the past few decades, enjoyed, uh, multilateralism. That is a world that recognizes the importance of multilateral institutions like UNDP and our collective future, and today, we can't say the same. Development aid has moved into a transactional space. So it really is more about tit for tat, And that is difficult because it compromises our ability to keep global focus on global development challenges. So development is local, but it's also global. So an agency like UNDP, like many in the UN, are having to scramble to see how do we continue to accompany countries' development in an era when development aid is being defunded. And, how do we maintain global solidarity for countries that require support still to undertake their development journey. So it's trying times, but also I see some opportunities within that. Well, this is happening all very quickly and it's still fluid because every day you wake up and there's a new reality. So I think all of us are trying not to be too distracted by the disruptions because this is what our Secretary General said. He said, don't allow the disruptions to distract you from the main goals of the UN, our core values, for instance. So on one hand, we have to keep our composure and our eyes concentrated on the challenges that face humanity, climate change, eroding fiscal space, financing for development, the Sustainable Development Goals. On the other hand, we have to adapt to the changes and the new realities and the difficulties that many countries will face and the shrinking space of multilateralism. So it's a kind of a double whammy. On one hand, let's keep our eyes on the prize. We are very clear what humanity needs to survive and to be sustained, to be sustainable. On the other hand, yes, we have to remodel. So there is a lot of discussion going on how we right size, not downsize, but right size our entities so that we have a sharper focus. We're going to be doing more with less. What does that mean in terms of our structures, in terms of our workforce, in terms of the issues that we focus on? And I think the development model is going to change as a result of this because we will get a little bit smarter, I think, and these are now, I think, the positive things. We should be able to look at leveraging, look at more collaboration between our systems, our institutions. We need to look at consolidation more. It's not a time to have multiple structures and silos. We need to defeat the silos in our system. So I think overall, everyone is thinking of adjustments that make us more nimble, but also it's not really, for me, it's not about how we survive. It's about how we thrive in times of uncertainty. It's about how we make ourselves better. No, I think it's part of what I'm saying about changing our development model. Because traditionally, of course, we work with governments and we work on institutions, we work on systems, but there is a major disruption that technology has brought into play. So you have to do development differently. You have to think about the new technologies. You have to think about innovation. But also we now have multiple burdens on economies, just apart from what's happening globally and the geopolitics and what's about to happen to the global economy in terms of, a major upset that will affect everyone, including Nigeria. You have the fact that we have new technologies, AI for one, and the governance of all these technologies. I always say, actually, the countries that will make it in the current environment are those who understand the importance of technology and innovation in development, in the development space, and what it will take to transform their systems using these new tools. And it's about government investment in the things that matter, right? Because technology doesn't just happen by itself. Innovation doesn't just happen by itself. And it's not just a remit of the private sector and enterprises. It's governments that make that happen. If you look at the US, all advanced countries, the government stepped up and invested heavily. The kind of money you need to transition your economy in a way that it adopts technological advancement is not what private sector can handle alone. So governments that understand the place of innovation and technology in the development space are the ones who will make it. And UNDP is trying to also orient itself. We need to get our own digital literacy in the organization to be able to support and accompany countries to move in that direction. This is a game changer. The need to accelerate development using the new technologies. And we can get so much further. But we also have the negative parts of digital tools and technology. And, well, you can leave a lot of people behind, right? You know, because if it becomes a thing of access, who has access and who doesn't. And those who have access are going to get on the speed lane, and those who don't will be left way behind. So you have to make sure that there is access, affordability, you know, for everyone, and you're pulling also women. We can have a lot of inequality that is widened if we don't govern the technology space better. Technology in politics, you know, the whole misinformation campaign that then influences decisions that are made. I mean, governments need to figure out how to manage that, because that's quite dangerous, where technology and digital is used to pass on all kinds of information that is untrue, but also can fan conflict and violence. So there are areas that could be quite dangerous and disturbing, and we need to make sure that governing the technology space includes all of these reflections. Yes, I think education, you know, making sure that you're bringing the learning into education spaces, because we've invested over the years in making sure girls are in school. And now we've made a lot of progress. So you have a captive platform there. Start with the schools, you know, to make sure that at least these technological facilities are made available in schools, because in schools it won't just be the boys, but you do need to prioritize girls because they are in a way disadvantaged already with access. So it has to be deliberate effort made at the level of governments, but also organizations like ours, to ensure that girls are not left behind. And we are doing that. We are making sure that STEM and all of that have some specific components that address the gap with the girls. We have to encourage parents to encourage their girls to go into engineering and other courses like that, and make sure that they have the support to do that. So, you know, there are multiple things that has to be done on that, but it has to be intentional. Indeed, you know, we flagged off Timbuktu, which is this initiative to support the sort of startup revolution that is already happening on the continent, to spark that. And, you know, the idea is to establish 10 hubs, tech hubs across, at a Pan-African scale across the continent. And the Lagos hub, which is fintech, was the first one that was launched. So congratulations, Nigeria. But since then, we've now launched another 3. As you say, it's not even been 1 year, so we're on a speed lane there. We launched in Kigali, the Health Tech Hub, in Nairobi, the Green Tech Hub, and we also launched the Mind Tech Hub in Lusaka. This year, towards the end of the year, we will launch Creative Tech in Cape Town and Manufacturing Tech in Addis Ababa. So I would say the launching 4 out of 10 hubs is in less than 1 year is significant progress. But also, I don't know if you remember, part of Timbuktu is creating these innovation pods in universities. And we have now established 14 of these pods in 14 countries. And the one in Nigeria will be hosted by the University of Lagos and will focus on AI. And that should be launched before the end of the year. So we're quite pleased with the progress that's being made. Of course, still a lot to be done. We've already launched cohorts in each of these hubs. So accelerator programs are ongoing right now with each of the hubs where we've launched. And it's exciting what's coming out of the founders in terms of how they value the support of Timbuktu. Some of them came to us and said, you haven't given us any money, but we are getting calls. You know, there was one young lady from Kenya who was part of the Health Tech Hub. She has a business, an enterprise on health. And she said the moment she was selected in the Timbuktu cohort and started the program, she got so many calls from investors who saw her for the first time and her potential. So in terms of how we measure success, it's not necessarily the money that we mobilize for the founders, it's the access that we're providing to them, it's the visibility that we're bringing to their trade, it's the importance that we're putting on them to the world and saying an organization like UNDP sees this young person and we want you to see them too. So our brand, it's actually what's also giving them credibility and giving them attention and access. Absolutely, and in fact, she didn't come alone. You know, she came with a group of investors from Sweden, which is why we wanted to accompany them, because we wanted them to see for themselves. You know, the news about Africa out there, including Nigeria, by the way, is quite negative, right? And people always see the obstacles and the challenges before they see the possibilities. So part of our mission there was to show them the opportunity that exists, the possibilities, the resilience, the ingenuity of these young people. So we had the young people at the center tell their stories, their own journey, and the passion that came out of there, not just passion, but also the accomplishments that they've made with very little injection of support, showed these investors from Sweden that Nigeria is a serious destination for investment. And this is not a country where you only think in terms of aid. Because these young people were not joking, and they were not asking for aid, they are asking for equity. They're saying, you know, we are viable businesses that can produce returns for you. But also they are saying, because the Crown Princess is a goodwill ambassador for UNDP who cares about social issues. And every single solution that we heard yesterday that she listened to was about solving a particular development challenge, whether it was in the health sector with a young lady who had used AI to create a character called Lola that will support girls in relation to their cycles, or the young man who is passionate about agriculture and productivity, who has a drone technology to help in record time spray you know, plants and crops with the drone, or the young woman who has come up with a refrigeration technology that allows you to, small, medium enterprises who have issues with power, can now have these solarized refrigerators and freezers, which allows them to just work without electricity and pay incrementally. So an example is, this is why the innovation is quite exciting, because you have a business that needs cooling facilities. To buy one will cost you $2,000. Now, with the technology, you can do a pay-as-you-go. So you can pay just 10, 20% down payment, and then the company allows you, through a device, to pay as you go, right? Just the impact that has, because this business can now go and purchase 10 of those instead of 1 or 2, and they also have a technology that if you don't pay, it switches off automatically, So these are solutions that are for everyday people. The capital systems solve for the rich. Our young entrepreneurs, particularly those who are powered by technology, are solving for ordinary people. And that's what excites UNDP, and that's why we partner with them. We've been looking at Nigeria's numbers. I mean, overall, the scores are not good globally. I think we have only 17% of the SDGs achieved so far globally. Nigeria, I think we only have one SDG that's on track, right? And that is the climate is rated quite well in terms of Nigeria's ability to deal with climate action. But the rest, we have moderate progress in about 4 areas, and the rest are really off track. But this is quite common in the rest of the world. And I think what is happening now globally, it's a wake-up call for Africa, because what's making achievement of the SDGs that much more difficult? Yes, there was COVID, and yes, there's been a lot of financial turbulence, but the fact that we have not been able to go beyond aid to really prioritize things like structural transformation that allows us to add value to our raw materials, so that Africa is not just exporting raw materials rather than creating industries that will create jobs. That's one that needs to be addressed urgently. And the current tariff situation pushes us even harder, because you can't just be an oil economy anymore. The volatility is too much. You can crash any moment when the prices go down. So you have to be forced to look at the non-oil sector. And that forces you as a country to then say, where are the investments that we need to industrialize, to do a little bit more manufacturing, and so that we can expand job creation. And secondly is in the area of looking at what we do with our human capital. It's not just about minerals and oil. We have huge young population. We need to invest in skilling them and giving them opportunities to scale their talent. That's really, really important. You have to see them. And thirdly, the digital technology issues. I think countries need to prioritize that if we're going to get there faster. And I think it's also very important to start looking at more trade and investment, put energies behind that rather than energy behind negotiating sort of on aid. Africa cannot outsource what it needs to keep its population alive. We can't say because an aid agency withdraws from a country, the people start to die. If that's the case, that's not a country, This is a rich continent. Why can't we prioritize our people? Why can't we say that Africa's money needs to work for Africa's people? we're generating a lot of resources, but a lot of it is escaping. Illicit financial flows up to $90 billion a year lost. But we then go with a begging bowl for the same money to be returned in form of aid with ties and in form of loans that have very high interest rates, right? So there needs to be a conversation that African leaders need to have with themselves and with the private sector to say we need to re-engineer our economies so that Africa's money works for Africa's people, because this continent has money.
Those are long-term strategies and goals. What would be immediate solutions to Africa living beyond aid?
Well, I think you have the Africa Continental Free Trade Area that can help power economies in terms of productivity. Because if you implement this arrangement, which is now the largest integrated market in the world, $1.3 billion market, billion people market, you can't, I mean, countries have signed this. You now have to ask the serious questions, especially in this tariff war, trade war environment. How do we implement this? Because that's going to help power our economies. That's going to help us discover new avenues for revenue mobilization, because Africa's trade with itself is minimal, right? So you have that opportunity, and I would say countries now have to come together in an urgent way and talk about how to remove the obstacles that are still in the way of making this a reality, particularly cross-border issues. The second one, I think, is, you need to then ask, who are our partners? And what kind of strategies are we having with these partners? Everybody has a strategy for Africa and for African countries. I haven't seen Africa's strategy for the European Union, Africa's strategy for India, Africa's strategy for Japan. I think it's really important now to understand how to negotiate better deals with their partners, whether it's in the business sector, where Africa has a lot to offer, right, in terms of its minerals, but also other things that the world is looking for. But we don't always get a fair deal. So very quickly building the capability to negotiate in the world market, to negotiate in the forums like the G20 for fairer, more just deals with Africa. It's really important, and you can do that at individual countries, but I think better to do it as one. We have a seat at the G20 as Africa through the African Union. The G20 this year will be hosted by South Africa under very strenuous circumstances where the world is not coming together around the things that matter, like financing for development. Africa needs to unify around the key priorities that it needs to secure on those platforms. So leaders need to come together and think about this, and they need to carry along their private sector, right? So there are things to do short, medium, long term. Short term, you need to put together very quickly a task team that's going to try to understand the impact of this on economies and people and come up with immediate measures to deal with them. And long term, I think looking at the structure of our economies and making choices that favor the country. We need to tackle governance, This is something that UNDP works on a daily basis. And as I said, it's not a poor continent. Nigeria is not a poor country. We've got everything we need here. But governance issues have prevented us from getting there. Somebody said, we exist to stop you from going from hell rather than taking you to heaven. I think we need to go beyond this, and our investment should be about taking people to heaven, not just stopping them from going to hell. And that means you go all the way. You go to the deeper things, the roots of the problems, and start to tackle them, So it's urgent. I think everyone has to take in the urgency of this, come up with emergency measures, but go beyond emergency measures, just reacting. You know, Africa, the only way, if you ask me, to survive what's happening now is unity among the willing coalition, those who believe still, unity within Africa, but also Africa unifying with partners who have their best interest at heart. Africa being able to negotiate better deals. It's going to be important to carry along Africa's private sector. It's going to be important to have social safety nets, because some people will fall through the cracks in this mayhem. Nobody even has talked about big companies that are now rolling back on rights, labor rights. You know, this stuff is contagious. You know, people who want to use this opportunity to exploit more are coming now. I mean, companies are starting to pull back on gender equality, on, you know, DEI, as you say, diversity, equality, and inclusion. This cannot happen in Africa because we're still so far away from mobilizing all of society for our prosperity. So you cannot have a situation where businesses don't value inclusion, diversity, and equity, right? We can't afford a situation where governments are not prioritizing gender equality, because we know that empowering women is an important ingredient in getting there. So rolling back some of these values, it's not an option for Africa. You know, we have to insist on them, because without them, we don't have a sustainable future. These core values are really important in the development journey. We can see where we've seen progress, particularly in Europe. They have had to integrate these value systems. So it's about choices, but we have to keep very vigilant on how all of our systems are maintaining progress in these areas, including the business sector.
You're giving us a lot of